Greetings. The topic of today's webinar will be a recent article published in Teaching Exceptional Children called Assistive Technology Policy to Practice for Students with Low Vision and Blindness. I will be your presenter today. My name is Allie Futty. I'm the Program Manager for the Northeast Resource Center Vision Education within the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I'm also a licensed teacher of the visually impaired, certified assistive technology instructional specialist for people with visual impairments, and certified orientation and mobility specialist. The purpose of this article was to transfer the recent OSEP policy to practice for those working with individuals with visual impairments. In January of 2024, the Office of Educational Technology and the Office of Special Education Programs released a Dear Colleague letter and myths and facts document. The purpose of this was to clarify IDEA's requirements and relationship to AT services and devices and address common myths about AT in the schools. This article aims to articulate how this guidance can be applied to the student population with visual impairments and blindness. So when thinking about assistive technology and students with VI, we're talking about a unique population that needs special consideration. Students with visual impairments are a very low incidence special education population with highly specialized AT needs. It's common that school districts and schools may go years between having students with visual impairment diagnoses. They're a highly heterogeneous group. So the very wide array of presentations and the kinds of students that you'll work with visual impairment. And they often require more than one AT device to receive a free and appropriate public education. Research across studies has demonstrated that less than 50% of students with visual impairments have the technology they need in schools, demonstrating why it's so important to be able to understand AT guidance in relationship to this population in particular. And due to the low incidence nature and wide variety of presentation in this population, it can be harder for school teams to gain access to what best practices might look like for AT services and devices for this population. So in the next section of this presentation, I'm going to discuss some highlights of best practices from this article. So best practice number one for students with visual impairments is to make sure you're considering the AT needs. IEP teams must consider AT needs for every student on an IEP, including those with visual impairments, each time the IEP team meets. This should include both devices and services. So sometimes teams can get caught in what we call the device talk. You know, we jump immediately to what kinds of high-tech or low-tech devices does this student need? And we neglect to discuss the services that the student will require to best be able to implement that AT as a part of their program within the school setting. So that may include training to professionals, that may include training to the student themselves, that may include training to the parents, that may include maintenance of the device, updating of the device. So anything within IDA that falls under those service categories must be considered within the IEP. The teacher of students with visual impairments, or the TVI, is a critical member of this team, and every child with a visual impairment should have a TVI on their team. Students need access from low to high tech. So this is a graphic demonstrating some of the low and high tech that students with visual impairments will use in the schools. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just meant to give some examples of tools that may be used. So for visual access, when we're thinking about low tech, we're thinking about things like large print books, slant boards, monoculars. In high tech, we're thinking about things like distance camera, large monitors, screen magnification software. For auditory and tactile access, low tech, we're thinking about things like Perkins braillers, talking scales, liquid level indicators. And for high tech, we're talking about things like screen reading software, braille displays, and optical character recognition software. The second best practice I want to highlight is providing assessment where appropriate. So AT devices and services can be provided without evaluation when the IEP team determines it's appropriate. However, the example that the myths and facts document gives on this clarification is something like a graphic organizer. Within the context of a child with a visual impairment, this might be something like a bold line pen. We may not need a formal evaluation to make the decision as a team that the child needs a bold line pen to be able to use that pen for writing activities in the classroom. However, when multiple devices, and this is very important and clarified within the myths and facts document, when multiple devices are needed or devices will be used across a variety of educational settings, an evaluation is warranted. This will be the case for most students with VI. So most students with VI should have a recent assistive technology evaluation on file. The TVI is a critical member of that evaluation team. Another critical member may be a certified assistive technology instructional specialist for people with visual impairments, also known as a CADIS. They can help support the team to make appropriate decisions when the team doesn't currently contain all the expertise that would be required to create a high quality evaluation. So what is a CADIS? A lot of people may have not heard of that before. They're certified by the Academy for the Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals, or ACVREP. A CADIS is a professional who has demonstrated through education and experience clinical competencies in the four core domain areas of assessment, instruction, configuration, and exploration, and has passed a national certifying exam. While many school districts may not employ a CADIS directly, often they can be contracted through local blindness and visual impairment agencies. There's also independent contractors who function as CADIS. Sometimes teachers with the visually impaired are also certified as CADIS. Because this is a relatively new certification, they're not currently available everywhere. So in this case, teams should use the combination of their knowledge to make appropriate determinations and request additional help from district AT specialists and state AT projects where appropriate. Best practice 3 is deploy the AT services and devices. So a written implementation plan should be in place for how AT devices and associated services will be deployed for the student. The Department of Ed clarified that while the IT department at the school is an important partner, AT devices do not need to be approved by the LEA's IT department. This is an IEP team decision. Every aspect of the device integration and training should be carefully planned. This slide includes an example of what an AT implementation plan may look like for a student with a visual impairment. These implementation plans can come in many different forms. The important thing is the IEP team has one. There's nothing prescriptive about this. There just needs to be a clear explanation of what tools are needed, who will be involved in those tools, who has what responsibility in delivering the AT services. That includes the maintenance of the tool. And then also, how will training needs be addressed? Who will be training the student? Who will be training professionals within school? Who will be training the family? And any notes that might help you make sense of the implementation plan. For example, how is data going to be collected about how this student is doing with their particular device? So this example is with an assistive technology called the Cloverbook Pro, which is a desktop portable electronic magnification device that is, as one example of a device a student with a visual impairment may use. And this plan is an explanation of how this individual student will use that device within the school setting. Best practice 4 is to have consistent AT devices and services from birth through age 22 for students with visual impairments. So for infants and toddlers, Part C of IDEA allows for the full range of AT devices and services. Infants and toddlers with VI will benefit from AT to gain environmental information about the world around them, develop efficient sensory use, reach developmental milestones, and integrate sensory information. So what this might actually look like are things like adapted books with Braille in large print, handheld digital magnifiers to look at the pictures in books, or long white canes, if that is determined appropriate by an orientation and mobility specialist. For transition age youth, tech must be considered for the transition planning. So this must include any adult agencies to ensure a plan is in place for this technology to be used once the student graduates from high school. And again, here, a certified vision rehabilitation therapist, or a CVRT, and a CADIS, which we discussed earlier, can assist students in continuing to learn AT upon graduation. It's important the student has access to AT for all aspects of their transition plan. So this may include employment sites, if that's a part of the IEP transition plan. This may include post-secondary settings if the student is engaged in post-secondary courses as a part of their transition plan. I just want to make an important but brief note about Braille. Technology has not and will never replace the need for Braille literacy. Audiobooks do not replace print literacy for sighted students in the same way that audiobooks do not replace Braille literacy for a student who needs tactile access to written materials. IDEA very clearly states that the school teams must, by default, provide Braille instruction for a student who is blind or visually impaired unless the team determines through an evaluation that the student does not require Braille instruction. So that's an important note. If you don't come from within the field of visual impairments, you may not realize that Braille is the default for any student with a visual impairment at IEP unless a qualified professional, such as a teacher of the visually impaired, has determined that the student does not require Braille instruction. So in conclusion, some benefits of really thinking about assistive technology in the student with VI's program. There are better educational employment outcomes, higher levels of independence and self-esteem, meeting legal requirements under IDEA, providing clarification for the IEP teams, and then some challenges ahead. So there is a lack of qualified personnel. It's a very highly heterogeneous group. So just because you learn what works for one student with a visual impairment doesn't mean that you can apply it to all students with visual impairments. And then there's also a lack of understanding of the unique needs of low incidence populations. Thank you for your attention. If you would like to reach out to me for more information, my email address is alexandra.futty@umb.edu.